Welcome to a new episode of Duo Discourse. Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into Judaism. It's such an ancient civilization, really defined by its history, its beliefs, and I think this ongoing pursuit of knowledge. Our mission here is to go beyond the basics, to really explore the core philosophical concepts, trace some of the huge historical shifts, and maybe uncover the tensions shaping Jewish identity today.
It's absolutely an exploration centered on resilience. If we had to define Judaism simply, it's the religion of the Jewish people. At its root is a foundational belief in a single, omnipotent, all-knowing God, the one who created and, sustains existence.
And the Torah is the starting point for that.
The Torah is the initial blueprint, a manual, if you will, for developing a real active relationship with that creator.
So to understand the whole trajectory, we have to start at the beginning, at the foundational stories in history. We're talking about the patriarchal era, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who was later renamed Israel, of course.
Exactly. And it's so important to remember Abraham's unique position here. He's cited as the biological progenitor not just of the Israelites through his son Isaac, but also of the Arabs through his first son, Ishmael.
Right, that common thread is the framework for all three Abrahamic faiths.
It is.
But when you read those foundational stories, you immediately run into a critical tension. The difference between the traditional narrative, the one most people know, and what modern scholarship suggests.
And that tension is constant. Tradition really centers history on these epic, miraculous events in the Bible. Slavery in Egypt, the Exodus, the 40 years in the wilderness. Yet the overwhelming consensus among archaeologists and modern scholars, well, it points to Iron Age Israel having indigenous origins.
Right, from within Canaan itself.
Yes. The archaeological record simply doesn't support the sheer narrative scale of the Exodus as it's described.
That's a crucial distinction for understanding how history is recorded versus how it's remembered.
It is. In a lot of academic circles, the historical investigation of Moses and the Exodus is, well, it's effectively been abandoned. But here's the key insight. While the timeline and the scale are contested, scholars often acknowledge that the biblical narrative holds this crucial historical core.
A core of identity.
A core of identity, that's what matters most. For Jewish identity, the story of being a people redeemed by God is just as defining as any verifiable date.
And from there, we see this trajectory quickly lead to crisis. After the initial kingdom, the pattern becomes conquest by foreign empires, which leads to exile, the diaspora.
A scattering of the population.
Yes.
And this period culminates with the Roman conquest in 63 BCE.
Which sets the stage for the most profound, really cataclysmic shift in Jewish religious life.
A shift that redefined everything.
I want to spend some real time here because this feels like where modern Judaism is essentially born. The faith shifts from a national cult centered on physical sacrifice in one place to a religion centered on law and text. What was the mechanism for such a radical change?
The mechanism was absolute destruction. The obliteration of the Second Temple in Jerusalem by the Romans in 70 CE.
Wow.
You have to understand, before this moment, religious life was sacrificial worship. It required the temple. It required the priesthood. When that center was annihilated, the entire structure had to adapt instantly, just to survive.
So the focus moves from the altar to the home and a community.
Precisely. Religious practice morphed into prayer, which replaced sacrifice and deep Torah study and gathering in synagogues or shoals. This is what established Rabbinic Judaism, and it drew its authority from the interpretations developed by the Pharisees.
So how did they manage to maintain any unity without a central temple or a priesthood?
Through the centrality of the oral Torah. The written Torah, the first 5 books, it needed interpretation. It needed application for every new generation. This interpretive tradition, at first it was all transmitted orally, but it was eventually codified in the Mishnah around 200 CE.
And then expanded on.
And then elaborated on in this scrawling, millennia-long commentary we know as the Talmud. This entire body of work, the oral Torah, it became the foundation for halakha for Jewish law. It was the portable homeland.
That's a fascinating way to put it. The law itself becomes the binding force, replacing a physical building. But halakha is often misunderstood, isn't it? As just a rigid list of rituals. It seems like it's so much more, almost a complete ethical operating system for a society.
Absolutely. The ethical dimension is paramount. And this is where you find some profound intellectual ideas. For example, the requirement to give money to those in need is called tzedakah.
Okay.
But the word tzedakah means justice or righteousness. It's not just charity or philanthropy.
Yeah, it's not simply a nice thing to do. It's an act of justice, something that's required.
Correct. It means you owe the poor justice, and they are entitled to receive it. And this ethical framework inspires obligations like miser kesafim, which is a required tithe of one's income, and deeply personal duties, like bikur cholim, the imperative to visit and care for the sick. It's an act that emphasizes our shared human fragility.
This speaks to that famous principle of communal responsibility.
Yes, the core principle is Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Baze. All of Israel are responsible for one another.
Yeah.
And it's not theoretical. It manifests in real community structures that support education, hunger relief, medical services. It shows that the law is fundamentally rooted in ensuring the welfare of others.
So if the temple's destruction forced this shift towards law, how did that intense focus on interpretation and text? How did that evolve into the deep philosophical tradition we see later on?
It happened in these bursts of intellectual brilliance, often when Jews were interacting with other vibrant cultures. A critical era was the golden age of Jewish culture in Spain. We're talking roughly the 11th and 12th centuries. And this is where we find a figure like Judah Halevi.
Halevi is famous for the Kuzari. He seems to have been pushing back against the rationalism of his day, right?
He really was. At the time, much of the intellectual world, including Jewish thinkers like Maimonides, was deeply influenced by Aristotle, by Greek rationalism. Halevi, in the Kuzari, he championed experiential knowledge of God. He argued that rational proofs alone just weren't enough to grasp divine revelation.
And he didn't write it as some dry academic text.
That's why it was so effective.
Yeah.
He used a dialogue. It's a conversation between a king and a rabbi. It made this incredibly complex theology accessible, and he argued that the Jewish people hold this unique, pivotal position because of that shared historical experience at Sinai.
Let's fast forward to the 20th century. We find figures who are applying this tradition to modern ethics. Martin Buber is central here with I and thou.
Buber's insight is still so profound because you can apply it completely outside of religious discussion. He drew this critical distinction between the I-it relationship, where we treat another person or even an idea as a detached object for our use, and the I-thou relationship.
What defines that I-thou interaction?
It's ethical, it's open, it's characterized by what he called total presentness. You encounter the other fully without trying to categorize or use them. For Buber, the ultimate I-thou relationship is between humanity and God.
And then there's Abraham Joshua Heschel, a philosopher who was just as well known for his activism in the U.S. civil rights movement. He seems to be that bridge.
Heschel really emphasized Jewish mysticism, but also the role of prophecy. He famously defined a prophet not as someone who predicts the future, but as the voice that God has lent to the silent agony of the poor. For him, the prophet stands at a crossing point of God and man. It directly links theology to social justice. His marching from Selma with Martin Luther King Jr. was a physical manifestation of that philosophy.
That deep connection to correcting society's wrongs, it brings us back to the concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world.
It's really the operating philosophy of modern Jewish engagement. Its origin is deeply mystical. Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, a 16th century Kabbalist, taught that when God created the world, divine light was held in vessels that shattered, scattering these divine sparks everywhere. Humanity's mission, then, is to redeem those sparks through mitzvahs, through good deeds.
So the world is fundamentally broken, and we're tasked with reassembling the divine presence within it.
Exactly. But in the modern post-Enlightenment era, Tikkun Olam has been reinterpreted. It's largely focused on secular social justice, now pursuing equal rights, fighting hunger, amending human law. It affirms that Jews have a responsibility for the welfare of all of society, not just their own community.
Okay, now we have to shift to the weight of history, the role of suffering and displacement, because these events weren't footnotes. They fundamentally reshaped theology.
History for the Jewish people is just. It's punctuated by trauma. From the Spanish expulsion in 1492, which shattered a great center of Jewish learning, all the way to the 20th century. And the defining trauma of the modern era is, without a doubt, the Holocaust, HaShoah.
The systematic murder of 6 million Jewish men, women, and children. The scale it's just impossible to comprehend.
The event was so destructive that it created an entirely new theological challenge, what's known as Holocaust theology. Thinkers like Richard Rubinstein, in his book After Auschwitz, they grappled with the unanswerable. If God is all-powerful and all good, how could this happen? Does the covenant still hold?
And that forces a choice. Either God was complicit, or God is omnipotent, or God is somehow hidden, silent.
Those are the core tensions. The struggle to reconcile faith with the reality of such unprecedented evil. And this trauma occurred right before the establishment of the State of Israel.
Which created this incredible urgency, a deep historical link.
It did. Immigration to mandatory Palestine was tightly restricted before the war. So after 1945, tens of thousands of Holocaust survivors found refuge in the newly established state. The memory of HaShoah became inextricably tied to the identity and the imperative of statehood.
Moving into the present, this history collides with modernity, creating what people often call a deep identity crisis within Israel itself. What's driving that tension?
Secularization. Historically, Jewish identity was a single integrated unit. Religion, nation, culture were all one and the same. Secularization broke that apart. Many Jews now opt for a non-religious lifestyle, while fiercely maintaining the cultural or national parts of their identity.
And this leads directly to real societal conflicts.
Absolutely. The country is marked by this deep duality, a tension between a Western liberal culture and a traditional Jewish culture. And this is why debates over the role of religion in the state become so fierce. Things like the status of marriage and divorce, or the debates over mandatory military conscription for the ultra-Orthodox community. These aren't just political arguments. They are deep, often aggressive debates about the very soul of the state.
Let's touch on a common misconception. When we talk about religious practice, many in the West assume the same focus on the afterlife that you find in Christianity or Islam.
That is a key point of divergence. Jewish eschatology. The view of Olam Haba, the world to come. It's highly decentralized. It's diverse. We actually have surveys showing a majority of Jews don't believe in hell, and nearly half don't believe in heaven. And this underscores a foundational difference. The priority is overwhelmingly on Olam Hazeh, on life in this world.
Which aligns perfectly with the ethical priority of halak. The whole system is built for justice here.
Precisely. If life in this world is the focus, then saving it takes precedence over everything. The law is designed to be suspended in an emergency. The principle is clear. Halakha prioritizes life above all else. That means laws, even the most severe prohibitions like driving on Shabbat, they are suspended immediately to save a life.
As we wrap up, let's connect this long, complex tradition to its broader global influence. How has Jewish thought shaped the wider world?
Well, the foundational link is always Abraham as the patriarch for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But beyond that, look at the intellectual exchange. The Golden Age in Spain, from around 900 to 1100, was a nexus. It shows that Jewish thought flourished most vibrantly when Islamic rulers generally treated Jewish populations better than their Christian counterparts did.
And the texts themselves became these cross-cultural engines of thought.
The Kuzari is a stunning example. It wasn't just read by Jews, it was translated, and it gained popularity across Europe. The German Enlightenment philosopher Johann Gottlieb von Herder actually used Halevi's Kuzari as a model for philosophical dialogue. He found its conversational style more engaging than Plato.
And in the modern era, the work of Heschel and Buber just profoundly influenced how we think about ethics, far beyond religious dogma.
Yes, their philosophies, their calls for justice, they transcended the Jewish community. They became major forces in modern ethics and global social movements. They showed that this intense intellectual tradition can and must engage directly with the world's most pressing moral problems.
So we've traced Judaism from its ancient foundations through the radical transformation of rabbinic tradition and into the very complex challenges of the modern era.
And as a final reflective thought for you, I want to go back to Abraham Joshua Heschel and his philosophy of time. He described the Sabbath not merely as a day of rest from work, but as a palace in time, the chief spiritual discipline. By refraining from our focus on material production, on gain, we're declaring our allegiance to the Creator over mammon, over the pursuit of money or status.
So it's an act of worship centered on time itself, treating moments as sacred rather than seeking a physical, holy space.
Exactly. Heschel taught that unless one learns how to relish the taste of Sabbath in this world, to dedicate a part of their week to holiness and non-material engagement, they can't perceive the beauty of eternity in the world to come. It elevates time over space. It frames time as the ultimate site of holiness, and it challenges all of us to reconsider what truly holds priority in our frantic modern lives.
A truly profound concept on how we structure our lives and where we locate value. We hope this deep dive has provided you with some intellectual clarity and insight into the remarkable history and resilient philosophy of Judaism.